Chapter 20 of The Man with the Red Beard by David Whitelaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne. The Park Lane Affair. Once in London, however, the test could be made, and when I followed Felix Marazev down the steps of the Underground, I took no care to hide myself. He gave me one glance, and rather a searching one at that, as I took my seat nearly opposite him at the end of the long car. Then he returned to the paper he had taken from his pocket, and did not, so far as I saw, again raise his eyes except to read the names of the stations. Either the man's powers as an actor, and the hold he had over himself, were superhuman, or I had emerged triumphant from the test of my changed appearance. My man left the train at Charing Cross, and walking up Northumberland Avenue, hailed a Hampstead omnibus. It seemed to me that his little trip on the Underground had not been necessary, and that he could have taken the omnibus from Victoria. Perhaps it had been a red herring trail in case he was being followed. This put me on my guard, and I took care that he should not see me. While he entered the vehicle, I climbed on the top. By the time Hampstead was reached, the semi-darkness made my shadowing of him an easy matter. Marazev walked slowly up in the direction of Jack Straw's, leaving the great open space of the heath on his right. The man seemed either to have a great deal of time on his hands, or perhaps the beauty of the evening appealed to him. It was indeed a glorious end to the summer day, and I told myself in all likelihood he had but come to the heath for a walk. Well, he must go somewhere sooner or later. My time was my own, and I would not lose sight of him. On over the hill, taking the road dipping down to the left, went my man. It must have been about 8 o'clock when he turned in at a gate in a close hedge which surrounded a little low-roofed white cottage lying back from the road. I waited a while, so that his possible exit might not take me unawares. Then I approached the gate in the hedge. A trim flower-bordered path ran straight to a little green door. On either side close-cropped lawns cut into minute terraces and studded with standard rose-trees showed grey-green in the evening light. Beyond these was a small plantation of firs. A dainty little home, and to my mind not one that Marazev would choose. It was all too bright and healthy and clean. I seemed to know by intuition that within a few yards of me, behind the silken radiance of that blind, Myra was seated, and that the hour for which I had been waiting was at hand. My first thought was to open the gate and attempt to gain a glimpse of the room where the light was, but I told myself that it were hardly wise to risk anything now that I had practically gained the information I had waited for. What if this was not Myra's house? Suppose this was another nest such as that at Norwood? A nice fool I should look walking into the trap. Marazev would want to know a great deal about the man who was caught peeping through his windows. There was a simpler way to certify my convictions, and I took it. I made my way to the horse-pond and entered the bar of Jack Straw's Hotel, where by the courtesy of the proprietor I consulted a directory of Hampstead and district. I looked up the names of residents and found the name of Marshall at the cottage I had watched. I returned within a few moments, took my stand again in the road before the cottage, and wearily the hours passed. 9 struck, 10, then 1/2 past, and about 10 minutes afterwards I heard the door open and saw Felix Marazev coming down the path. He was not alone, and with him walked the graceful figure of a girl. I could not see her face, but I knew it for Myra Ramsay. They parted at the gate, and for the moment I was undecided which part to play, and then I saw that Marazev was walking quickly away, and I decided to follow him in the meantime. I would sleep on the situation and formulate my plans in the morning. I gave one longing look at the little house which sheltered Myra. Then I was at Marazev's heels. We had entered a dark street leading down, I think, to Hampstead village, when the strident cries of a newsboy caused me to pause in my steps and listen, as one always does at such cries. I could not catch what the boy was shouting, only here and there a word, burglary, shot. But I was anxious to know what had happened to send newsboys out to the heath on a Sunday night. Felix Marazev appeared to be still more anxious. Perhaps, being ahead of me, he was able to hear plainly what was being called out, for I saw him stop and fumble in his pocket for a coin. The urchin, having served him with a paper, turned and went off down a street to the right, his cries growing fainter and fainter. I had perforce to remain stationary, for Morozof was standing under a gas lamp within 20 yards of me, holding the paper he had bought up to the light. He read eagerly, and when he had finished he crushed the paper up into a ball and crammed it into his pocket. Then, mending his pace so that I found difficulty in keeping him in sight, he set off down the hill towards London. At Chalk Farm he hailed a cab. It was, I saw, the only one to be had, and it seemed that my chase had for the moment come to an end. I caught a sight of his face as he turned, and gave his instructions to the driver, and it was, I thought, whiter than usual, with a nervous, strained look in the eyes that spoke of troublous and disturbing thoughts. Unfortunately, I had to wait some 20 minutes before another cab put in an appearance, and by that time it was too late for me to think of overtaking my man. The paper I had bought from a boy on the corner was evidently an earlier edition. It was a Sunday morning paper reissued, and in the "Stop Press" there was a reference to a burglary in the West End that evening, but there were no particulars. There would be a late paper, I expected, at the hotel. As I entered the little hall the clerk behind the window beckoned me. There was a gentleman to see me in the smoking-room. He was very impatient, the clerk said. There was only one man besides the rat who knew where I was staying, and in some little trepidation I went to meet my visitor. At first sight the room seemed empty. Then with a bound a form sprang up from a deep-seated chair and fell upon me. It was Winson. "Shut the door, Sammy, shut the door." He dragged me to a chair as he spoke. "Now, what's it going to be, the Mercury or this tomfool knight-errantry?" "It's nearly over, Winson. I've traced the girl." "Excuse me, Sammy, but damn the girl. No, don't cut up rough. I'm excited. Is the Mercury to have the scoop or not?" "Really, Winson," I answered, somewhat nettled at his treatment of Myra's name, "I'm in the dark, quite." "Good heavens, man! And all the reporters of London filling Park Lane. You know Sir Boris Fenberg. You had his cheque 6 months ago. What do you know of all this?" "Please explain. I've only seen this paper," and I showed Winson the early edition I had bought. "What does it all mean?" "It means an attempt was made on the Azov diamond, and that there has been a fight with the police, and the suicide of one of the desperadoes on a balcony overlooking the park. Think of the colour in it, Sammy. You knew all about the Azov last time. What do you know of this? For Lord's sake, think of the Mercury. It used to be food and drink to you at one time." I was silent for a moment while Winson drained the contents of a tumbler that had been standing on the table. Then, "We'll go to the office, Winson. I'll help you with your report. But," I added, "you must take what I give you, just that. What I can tell you I will tell. You must ask for nothing further than that." He was scrambling into his overcoat as I spoke, and in a few minutes we were both in a hansom bowling along to Fleet Street, and I was listening breathlessly to the details of the latest sensation that was at that moment stirring the metropolis. It had been a desperate affair, with 2 policemen in hospital and the man who had done the damage in the mortuary. I smiled to myself as I listened to the description of the dead ruffian. I felt sorry for Winson. I would do all I could to make the Mercury report better than that of any of its contemporaries, but I wondered what Winson would say if he knew that the burglary that evening at the house of Sir Boris Fenberg was to me an open book, and, did I wish it, I could write a report which would set the whole of England talking for weeks. End of chapter 20.